Good day, grade 9s. Welcome to grade 9. Welcome to the first lesson for the term. The knowledge area for this term is going to be life and living. And this section contributes 80 marks towards your mid-year exam. So please pay attention and capitalize on these concepts because they are very easy. The topic for today's lesson is cells as the basic units of life. And the subtopic is the cell structure, differences between plant and animal cells, and cells in tissues, organs, and systems. I am your host, Kwanele Dlamini, and this lesson was proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education. So without any waste of time, let's get right into it. So what's the point of this lesson? What are we trying to achieve? We are trying to ensure that by the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain that the cell is the basic unit of all living organisms. You should also be able to identify the following organelles. That is your cell membrane, the nucleus, the cytoplasm, and the mitochondria. You should also be able to explain why cells come in different shapes and sizes. And you should also be able to differentiate between unicellular and multicellular organisms. And you should be able to explain that a group of cells forms a tissue, a group of tissues makes an organ, and organs working together, they make a system. They make an organism. Now, for more information on this, you can refer to the grade 9 CAPS document on page 56. Let's begin. Now, let's take a step back and revisit some of the concepts that we've learned in previous grades because they lay a foundation for today's lesson. Right, so in grade 4, we learned about living things. But what are living things? Living things are organisms that show life, that demonstrate life, okay? But what is life? You can think of life as nothing but a little dash between two dates, okay? The first date is when something is born, and then the last date is when something dies. But that's very vague, right? So let's try and go deeper. So what do we mean by living organisms? They should be demonstrating life. They should have the ability to grow, and they should be in a position to be able to feed or to absorb something like minerals in the case of plants, right? So plants don't have the ability to move, but other living organisms have the ability to move, okay? These are characteristics of living things. But the most important thing about living things is that they are made up of cells, okay? They are built up using cells. So if they have cells, they must undergo something which is very important for all living organisms, and that is cellular respiration, which is nothing but a process whereby a cell, the mitochondria of a cell breaks down food, okay, or sugars, and it releases carbon dioxide and creates energy for the cell. So it takes in oxygen and food and breaks it down to produce energy for the cells. So living organisms have energy coming from their cells. Right, so these are different examples of living organisms. They come in different shapes and forms, like we have all animals in different shapes and forms. We have bacteria, we have plants, we have fungi, and we have humans, us, okay? We are all part of living organisms. Why? Because we are made up of cells, and that enables us to undergo what? Cellular respiration. Let's continue. In grade 8, we learned about photosynthesis and respiration. But what is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis, for one, only occurs in plants, okay? It is a process whereby a plant will take in radiant energy from the sun, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and water from the ground. It will absorb water from the ground and use all of this to create what? Food, okay? Or sugars, right? So it creates sugars and oxygen, right? We're taking in what? Carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We are taking light energy from the sun, and we are taking in water, right? And we produce what? Sugars or food and oxygen. Now, this is made possible by the chloroplast, which contains a green pigment called the chlorophyll, which is located in plants and gives plants the green color, but you'll learn more about that as we continue with the lesson. Right, this process only occurs in plants and not in animals. Why? Because animals don't have the chloroplast. Right, we also learned about cellular respiration, which we already have talked about in the previous slide, right? So what is cellular respiration? Cellular respiration is basically a reverse of photosynthesis. How is that so? That is because in cellular respiration, we are taking in the food which is produced in photosynthesis, but this time around, we are taking in that food and the oxygen, and we are breaking it down to produce energy for the cells. And guess what? The carbon dioxide is a byproduct. Okay, carbon dioxide and water are byproducts of cellular respiration. And cellular respiration occurs in both plants and animals. In fact, it occurs in all living organisms. For as long as an organism has a cell, it will undergo cellular respiration. So these are the differences between the two. The one creates food, and that is photosynthesis. The other one breaks down the food to get energy, and that is cellular respiration. Photosynthesis only occurs in plants, and cellular respiration occurs in all living organisms. Let us continue. Now let's do a baseline assessment, which is nothing but a couple of questions just to test whether you still remember the concepts that you learned in previous grades. The first question for our baseline is as follows. What are animals, humans, bacteria, and plants made up of? Second question, which type of cell has a cell wall? Third question, what is the organelle that controls all cell activities? And lastly, what happens in the cytoplasm of an animal cell? So these questions are very easy, but I will give you 3 minutes to answer these questions. And when you are done, we will discuss the answers together. All right, learners, welcome back. I hope you were able to answer these 4 simple questions. So let's begin with the first one. What are cells, humans, bacteria, and plants made up of? What do you think? Yes, that's correct. They're made up of cells. Which type of cell has a cell wall? Anyone? Yes, that's correct. It is the plant cell. What is the organelle that controls all cell activities? This one should be easy. Yes, that's the nucleus. What happens in the cytoplasm of an animal cell? Yes, that's correct. Chemical reactions. Let us continue. Now let's define a couple of terms that we are going to encounter in the lesson so that we don't need to page through the glossary of the textbook to get definitions. The first term we are going to define is the cell. Right, so a cell is the basic unit of all living organisms. Next term, organelles are specialized structures found inside living cells that perform specific functions for the cell. The nucleus is an organelle found in both plant and animal cells and is responsible for controlling all cellular activities. The next one is the cytoplasm, which is a jelly-like liquid in the cell where chemical reactions take place. The next term is the mitochondria. Mitochondria is a plural form of the word mitochondrion. Okay? They are organelles found in the cytoplasm and they are responsible for producing energy for the cell, which we term as cellular respiration, the name of the process. The vacuole are organelles found in both plants and animal cells and they are responsible for storage. Right, the cell wall is an organelle found only in plant cells and it gives the cell its rigid shape. Okay, tissues are a group of similar cells. Organs are a group of different tissues working together. Systems are a group of organs working together. And an organism is a group of systems working together. Okay, hope you were able to get this terminology. Now we are going to begin with the nitty-gritties of the lesson. So we are talking about a cell structure. What is a cell though? We said that a cell is a basic unit of all living organisms. But what does that mean? It means that all living organisms are made up of cells. For instance, if you have, let's say, for instance, my eye. The eye is an organ in my body. It is made up of cells, okay? There are certain cells that the eye has that enables me to see you as you see me, okay? The same applies with an animal. It has cells that make different parts of its body, okay? So all living organisms are made up of these cells, and these cells are what defines us as living organisms. Let's continue. So all animals, humans and plants are made up of very small structures called cells. So the smallest building blocks of organisms or living organisms are cells. So this is how we differentiate between non-living and living organisms. Living organisms are made up of cells, and non-living organisms are probably not made up of cells because the cell is what defines us. It's the smallest building unit of living organisms. Right. So these cells are very, very, very tiny. You can only see them through the lens of a microscope. You can't see it with your naked eye. Right. So all animal cells, including human cells, because humans are classified as animals, they have the basic structure which includes the following: a cell membrane, a nucleus, the cytoplasm, many mitochondria, and many ribosomes. Okay, so this is a sample of an animal cell. And we have the cell membrane, which encloses the cell contents and controls what enters or leaves the cell. So we call it as a selectively permeable membrane. Why? Because it only allows certain sizes of particles to pass through and prevents certain particles which are larger than the pores of the cell membrane from passing through. So it's selectively permeable, and it only picks and chooses what enters and what leaves the cell. It is the enclosure of the cell organelles. Then we have the nucleus, which is this ball over there, and it controls all activities of the cell, okay? And the nucleus itself is enclosed by something called the nuclear membrane, which is this layer around the nucleus, okay? Right. Then we have the mitochondria. We've already talked about the mitochondria. This is where cellular respiration takes place, and cellular respiration releases energy from food. Okay. The next one is going to be the cytoplasm. This is the jelly-like liquid or fluid which holds the organelles of the cell together, and this is where chemical reactions take place in the cytoplasm. Okay, let's continue. Then we have the nucleus. The nucleus is very important because it contains DNA, which contains inherited characteristics such as your eye color, where it could be blue, it could be brown, it could be grayish, it could be black, and etc. Okay, that is determined by the DNA. The certain characteristics that we inherit from our parents are determined by our DNA. Okay, that's why when they do paternity tests to find out who is the father of a baby, they always use DNA and they compare the sequences there to see whether they are similar or not. But each individual has their own unique DNA, but closely related people, they have similar segments in their DNA structure. Okay, so the DNA is unique to each person and is the cause of variation within a species. We are humans, right? But we have different varieties in our appearance. Some of us appear to be white, some of us appear to be African, some of us appear to be Indian or even colored, but we are all humans. The DNA is what determines all of these things. Even your behavior, how you behave, is determined by the DNA that you inherited from your parents. Even your physical appearance. You are most likely to look like your parent than you are likely to look like your friends. Okay? Let's continue. The mitochondria are responsible for cellular respiration. And this is where energy is produced from food, okay, or sugars. They are called the energy powerhouse of the cell. Why are they called the energy powerhouse? This is because this is where energy is, this is where energy is produced for the cell, okay? So we call them the energy powerhouse. Right, and the structure of a mitochondria would look like a sausage with these lines like that, okay? It has these zigzaggy things. This is how you determine your mitochondria. Okay, let's continue. The cytoplasm is a jelly-like liquid in cells where reactions take place. So this would be your cytoplasm, okay? You see, this is a cell, and inside this cell, there is an area that is green in color. All of this around the cell is a fluid called the cytoplasm. Okay, right, and this is where chemical reactions take place. Then plant cells are slightly different to animal cells because they have additional organelles or additional features, right? They have something called the chloroplasts. Okay, the chloroplasts are these green things inside, these green organelles inside of the plant cell. They are not present in animal cells. And they also have what? a cell wall, which is this rigid wall around the cell. Okay, it gives it a rigid rectangular shape. Okay, so the cell wall holds the plant cells more tightly together and provides support and structure, making the plant cells more rigid. Plants are not very mobile, so they need a structure to support them. They need something to support their structure because they don't move around a lot and they are fragile. So they need to have this rigid outer layer, which is your cell wall. But why don't we have a cell wall in animal cells? Animals are very mobile creatures. So if they were to have something that was going to make them rigid, it would be difficult for their bones and muscles to facilitate movement. So they don't need a cell wall. Okay. Plants also have a green substance called the chlorophyll, which is found inside structures called chloroplast. This is the site for photosynthesis, as we've talked about earlier on. This is where plants manufacture their food using energy from the sun, using water and carbon dioxide. Okay. Then there's also something called vacuoles. The vacuole is filled with a fluid called the cell sap and is used for storage. So these large bubbles filled with cell sap are called what? The vacuole. They're like the largest structures inside of cells. They are used for storage. Okay, they contain a fluid called the cell sap. Right, now let's look at differences between a plant cell and an animal cell. But before we do that, let's quickly compare animals to plants and see what is it that makes them different from each other. Now, if you look at the picture towards the left, this picture over here, we have animals, right? All of these are animals, and they look different but similar to each other. Most of them, they have 4 legs and they have a tail and stuff like that. They look similar to each other. They are closely related to each other than they are to plants. On the other side, we have plants. Okay, if you look at the plants, they look similar to each other, but they look very, very different to the animals. Okay, right, that is because plants have certain organelles that makes them different to animals. Like for instance, they have chloroplast, which gives them the green color. They have cell walls, which make their structures rigid because they don't need to move around a lot. And they have the chlorophyll. They have the ability to undergo photosynthesis, which is something that doesn't happen with animal cells. So by looking at the two, we can completely see that they are different from each other. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the things that make them different. Right, so let's begin with this. Plant cells always have a cell wall around the cell membrane, of which animal cells only have the cell membrane. So animal cells only have a cell membrane, but plant cells have an additional layer which makes them more rigid. Okay, that is what? The cell wall. Okay, and the cell wall is very rigid and strong. Plant cells have a more regular shape, while animal cells have an irregular shape. Okay, if you look at an animal, you can't really see a particular shape because they don't really have a certain shape. But with plants, especially plant cells, okay, not just animals. If you look at an animal cell, it doesn't have a particular shape. But when you look at a plant cell, it has a defined shape and it's more rigid. Okay, while animal cells, they don't have a particular shape. Right, plant cells have chloroplasts while animal cells don't. These chloroplasts have a green pigment called the chlorophyll, which is responsible for photosynthesis in plants. But in animals, it doesn't exist. Okay, so plants can't produce their own food. Plants are producers because they make food. Okay, they make sugars from water, carbon dioxide, and the sunlight. Okay, they are able to manufacture their own food. Whereas Animals, they don't. Okay, so this is the site for photosynthesis, which is the chlorophyll, the green pigment that gives the plant its green color. Okay, it takes in sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to manufacture food for the plant. So the chlorophyll absorbs light energy from the sun, water from the soil, and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to produce their food during photosynthesis. It produces food for the plant. Okay, this is the entire process of photosynthesis. We've already talked about this. So you have carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, radiant energy from the sun, and then we have water from the ground, which is absorbed through the roots, and the product is going to be your sugar and oxygen, which we need for breathing. Okay, so plant cells also have large watery bubble called the vacuole, which functions as a support and storage for the cell. Okay, whereas in animal cells, they are usually small or temporary, and sometimes they're not even present at all. Okay, animals are called consumers because they cannot produce their own food. Some of them rely on plants for food, some of them rely on other animals for food, some of them rely on both animals and plants for food. They can't manufacture their own food because they don't have chloroplast, which have chlorophyll, and they can't have photosynthesis to make their own food. So they rely on plants, other animals, or both animals and plants for food. Okay, now let's talk about cells in tissues, organs, and systems. Specialized cells come in different shapes and sizes. Okay, so cells that are specialized, they have a particular function. Okay, they function something. Like for instance, there are cells in my eye which are responsible for me to be able to see, right? And those cells are very different to the cells that are in my heart, which is responsible for pumping blood to my body. Okay, that's what we mean by specialized. The cells that are located in my heart, their function is towards the activities of the heart, which includes pumping of blood. Okay, whereas the cells that are in my eye, they facilitate the function of vision or sight. Okay, they are different from each other. They will come in different shapes and forms because they specialize in different things. So different body cells are adapted to perform specific functions. Yes, the body is made up of many cells, but these cells are specialized to do a certain function at a time. Like I said, cells in my eye are responsible for vision, whereas cells in my heart are responsible for pumping blood. Okay, and they cannot be grouped together because they function different things. That's what we mean by they are adapted to perform specific functions. Okay, so each specialized group of cells will have the same shape and structure. Like the example that I'm using of the eye and the heart. The cells that are located in my eye, they will be similar to each other. They will have a similar shape and structure. Whereas the cells that are in my heart will also be similar to each other and will have a similar structure. But in comparison to the cells in my eye, they will be different from each other, okay, in terms of shape and size, because they function two different things. Right. So an example of specialized cells will be muscle cells. Muscle cells are an example of specialized cells, and they are adapted for the special function of causing the body to move. We know that motion or body movements are facilitated by our body muscles. Like for instance, if I do this to my arm, my muscles are contracting, and when I release, they are relaxing. Okay, these are muscles that enable my arm to move. Okay, so they have the function to make my body move. Right. Each muscle cell contains tiny fibers that can contract and relax. This is contraction, and this will be relaxation. So when you contract, it's like you're squeezing together, and then when you relax, you're letting it go back to its normal position. Right, so there are fibers that cause these muscles to relax and to contract and relax. Okay. So this process pulls on the bones and enables us to move. Each time you move your body, muscles are facilitating that process. And these tiny fibers, they will do what? They will either contract or relax. Okay? So they work in opposites to each other. They either contract or relax. Okay. Yeah. Let's continue. So we have about 350 different muscles in our bodies. That is a lot of muscles. 350. Our bodies have very, very many muscles. So this is an illustration to show different muscles in your body. You have muscles on your feet, your legs, your thighs, your stomach, your arms, and even your skull. Okay, you have muscles all over the body, and the total number of these muscles is 350. So muscle cells need lots of energy. Why? Why is that the case? That is because this movement needs to be supplied with energy. So they have what? Many mitochondria for this purpose. Okay? So remember we said the mitochondria is responsible for creating energy for the body. So it makes sense that muscle cells will have many mitochondria so that they can produce the energy required for movement. So these are different types of muscle cells. We have cardiac muscles, which are muscles of your heart. We have skeletal muscles, which are muscles of your bones, and then you have smooth muscle cells, which are muscles of your stomach and intestines. Okay, let us continue. Right, so now let's do an activity. Right, first question says, state whether the picture below is an animal or plant cell and give reasons. Number 2, label the cell parts discussed in the lesson. And last question, tabulate 4 differences between plant and animal cells. So you have 4 minutes to work on these 3 questions, and your time begins now. Alright learners, welcome back. I hope you were able to answer these 3 simple questions. I'll just go through the questions again and then we will do the answers. The first question says, state whether the picture below is an animal or plant cell and give reasons. Label the cell parts discussed in the lesson. And question 3 says, tabulate 4 differences between plant and animal cells. So in your table, you have to differentiate them in terms of shape, in terms of cell wall, the chloroplast, and the vacuole. Okay, you're looking at the plant cell and the animal cell. So let's quickly go through these questions together. Right. Oops. Right. So state whether the picture below is an animal or plant cell and give reasons. This is definitely a plant cell. Why is it a plant cell? That is because of the presence of the cell wall and chloroplasts. Okay? If you saw the picture, it has cell walls. It has a cell wall and chloroplasts and large vacuoles. Okay? Those are characteristics of a plant cell. Okay, because in an animal cell, we don't have a cell wall and we don't have chloroplasts. And if we have any vacuoles, they are usually small or they don't even exist. Okay, so I hope you were able to get the first question correctly. Let's move on to the second question. Label the parts discussed in the lesson. So we talked about many parts in the lesson, but let's just quickly go through the things that we talked about in the first question. We said this is a plant cell because of the presence of the cell wall, which is this outer rigid layer, and we have large vacuoles over here, and we have this green organelles, which are our chloroplasts. This is the vacuole, these are the chloroplasts, and this is your cell wall going around the cell. Okay, so I've already given you a couple of the labels, so it should be easy. Okay, now without any waste of time, let's start labeling the parts of the cell. So the first part that we can see is the cell wall, which is this rigid outer layer that gives the cell a regular shape. Okay, it looks more rectangular. Okay, it is a regular shape, and this is the outermost layer, which is the cell wall. What else can we see? What can you see? Yes, that's correct. We have large vacuoles. Okay, this is the vacuole. Okay, and what's the function of the vacuole, by the way? It is used for storage. Yes, that's correct. And the cell wall, it protects the cell. Okay, it makes it more rigid. Right, what else can you see? Right, we have the cytoplasm, which is the green area inside the cell where everything that is inside the cell is basically held. Okay, right, that green area around the cell, it's a green fluid. It's a jelly-like fluid that holds all the contents of the cell together. Okay, so every organelle that is inside the cell, that is enclosed by the cell membrane, is inside the it's inside the cytoplasm. And this is, what is the function of the cytoplasm again? Yes, that's correct. It is where chemical reactions occur. Now let's look at another label. What else can you see? I see a lot of things. What else can you see? Okay, we have the nucleus, which is this ball over here. Okay, this is your nucleus. And what's the function of the nucleus? Yes, it controls all activities of the cell. And this is where we find what? DNA, which contains what? Inherited characteristics. Yes, that's correct. Now let's label the next one. We have the chloroplasts, which are these green organelles, okay? These green organelles, we have 4 of them in this cell. And what's the function of this? Well, it contains something called the chlorophyll, a green pigment called chlorophyll, which is a site for photosynthesis. This is where a plant makes its own food, okay? Right, what else can you see? We have the cell membrane. Now, it's very easy to confuse the cell wall and the cell membrane. So let's just try and make a distinction between the two. The cell membrane is the inner layer that encloses everything inside the cell. And the cell wall is the outer layer that gives the cell its rigid shape. So in this case, this thick layer here is your cell wall. And then this inner layer, this one which is dark green, is your cell membrane. Okay, right, so the thick outer layer is your cell wall and the inner layer is your cell membrane. What does it do? Yes, that's correct. It controls what enters or leaves the cell, and it is selectively permeable. Okay, let us continue. Now, here is the third question. Tabulate 4 differences between plant and animal cells in terms of shape, cell wall, chloroplast, and the vacuole. So let's talk about that. In a plant cell, what is the shape? Yes, that's correct. It's a regular shape. And in animal cells, yes, it is irregular. Okay, it doesn't have a specific shape. The cell wall, is it present in a plant cell? Yes, yes, it is present. In an animal cell? Nope, it's absent. Chloroplasts, are they present in a plant cell? Yes, they are present. In animal cells, they don't exist. Vacuoles, are they present in a plant cell? Yes, and they are very large and central. In animal cells, they may or may not be present, and they are usually very small. And sometimes they are temporary if they are present. Okay, so I hope you were able to get these 3 questions correctly. And if you did not, I hope you were able to see where you went wrong. And in future, you will be able to get these correct, especially when you're writing your tests or exams. Let us continue. Oh, we have another activity. The table below shows the functions of different structures found in animal cells. Give the correct name of each of the functions. So there is your table. You are given the description and function. You need to come up with names. So the first description says the thin layer that surrounds the cell. It's shaped like a sausage, creates energy for the cell, found towards the center of the cell and controls all activities of the cell. Jelly-like liquid in cells where reactions take place. The last one, many round structures responsible for creating proteins. So we will do this activity together, okay? So what is the thin layer that surrounds the cell? The thin layer that surrounds the cell is called what? Yes, that's correct. It's the cell membrane. What is shaped like a sausage and creates energy for the cell? Anyone? Yes, that's correct. That is your mitochondrion. Now, when you have one, it's called a mitochondrion. When you have many, it is called mitochondria. Okay? Just be careful with that. What is found towards the center of the cell and controls all activities of the cell? This one should be easy for everyone. That is your nucleus. The jelly-like liquid in cells where reactions take place. This would be your what? Cytoplasm. Yes, that's correct. Many round structures responsible for creating proteins. This one, I will forgive you if you don't get it right because we didn't even cover it and it's not even part of your syllabus. But for interest's sake, this is your ribosomes, okay? But don't worry about it. If you don't know what it is, you don't need to know about it for now. But the higher you go with your education, it will become more relevant. Right. Now let's summarize our lesson. We said that all animals, humans, and plants are made up of very small structures which we call cells. And all cells have a cell membrane, a nucleus, cytoplasm, many mitochondria, and many ribosomes. You don't need to know the ribosomes though for now. The cell membrane encloses the cell contents and controls what enters or leaves the cell. It is selectively permeable. The nucleus controls all activities of the cell and it is enclosed by a nuclear membrane. And it contains a molecule called DNA, which contains inherited characteristics. The mitochondria, that's many, are responsible for cellular respiration, and this is where energy is produced. The cytoplasm is a jelly-like fluid or liquid where reactions take place. Now, these are the two cells in contrast to each other. The first is a plant cell and the second is an animal cell. The animal cell has everything that the plant cell has, but the plant cell has additional features like the cell wall, which makes it more rigid, and the chloroplasts, which are responsible for photosynthesis, large vacuoles, which are for storage. Okay, right, let us continue. And they look different from each other. The other one has an irregular shape. The differences between plant cells and animal cells are as follows. In terms of shape, the plant cell has a regular shape. The animal cell has an irregular shape. In terms of cell wall, it is present in plant cells. It is absent in animal cells. The chloroplasts are present in plant cells and they are absent in animal cells. The vacuoles are large and usually central in plant cells, and they may or may not exist in an animal cell, but if they do exist, they're usually very small. Then we said similar cells group together to form tissues such as your nerve, blood, and muscle cells. And different tissues form organs such as your heart, brain, and lungs. And this group of organs will work together to form a system. Okay? And a group of systems will form an organism. They will work together to form an organism. Okay. Now we are going to take some time to go through your WhatsApp questions. And the WhatsApp line is 064 748 8913. That's 064 748 8913. If you have a question, please send it through to our WhatsApp line and we will kindly assist you where you need help. Okay? Right. Don't know what's going on here. Okay. Something is not right. Okay. The WhatsApp line is 064 748 8913. Okay, there we go. There is our WhatsApp.
Do you know that you are different? Do you know that your fingerprint is different? Is different from your peers?
You can send your question through to our WhatsApp line, which is 064 748 8913. That's 064 748 8913. Okay. In the absence of questions, we will go back to the lesson. Okay. In our next lesson, we are going to be looking at systems in the human body. We have about 7 systems and we will look at all of them, how they function, what are their main components, and we are going to be looking at certain illnesses or health issues associated with each of these systems. We will cover a total of about 7 systems, and that will be your nervous system, your circulatory system, your respiratory system, your musculoskeletal system, and etc. I hope to see you there. It's going to be a very interesting lesson. Please don't miss out on that so that you can learn about the systems that are making you alive, okay? The systems that are continuously or constantly working to keep your body in great shape. Right. Okay. So in that next lesson, I hope you are going to avail yourself, as we are going to look at the circulatory system, which is about the flow of blood in your body, and we are going to be looking at the organs that make up that system. We will look at the musculoskeletal system, which involves your bones and your muscles, and look at issues that are associated with malfunctions of that system, which will include things like arthritis and osteoporosis. Now, those are big words, but next week you will learn and understand what they actually mean and imply. We will also look at the respiratory system. We've been talking about cellular respiration. We will look at the respiratory system and see how it works, okay? We will also look at the nervous system. We know that you have about 5 senses, and that includes your sense of taste, smell, sight, and feel, okay? We will look at all of that, and we will look at the issues that affect that particular system. So it's going to be a very interesting lesson. Right. Now, that brings us to the most important part of the lesson. Please remember, when you get to the end of this video, don't hesitate to scroll to the bottom. You will see a button that says complete and continue, or it may say complete. You are going to click on that button, which is this button here at the bottom, so that we will get confirmation that you did indeed watch your lesson from beginning to end. And guess what? You will get bonus points for doing just that. Okay? So please don't forget to do that. Now, that brings us to the end of our lesson. I hope you learned something about cells and the cell structure, the difference between plant cells and animal cells, and the difference between tissues, organs, systems, and organisms. Okay? Now, I would like to remind you that we are still in a pandemic, so please remember to sanitize your hands, wear your mask, and keep your distance, and if possible, keep running in zigzag to confuse this virus so that you stay in great shape and you are able to make it here for our lesson next week, same time. Now, this lesson was proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education. And my name is Kwanele Dlamini, and I'll be hosting you for all of the Natural Sciences Grade 9 lessons. And it's going to be interesting as we continue. Right, so please avail yourself next week, same time, same place, as we are going to be looking at systems in the human body. And it's going to be a very interesting lesson, I promise you. Now, I've been talking for a very long time. I think it is time for me to say bye-bye. Please take care of yourself. Until next time.